in the early days, I had given music lessons to kind of for extra eating food, eating stuff. And I was giving guitar lessons and occasionally a keyboard lesson if I found somebody that really had an ear, I thought really had a chance of being a real player. And I was several years older than Chuck. Chuck was a junior in high school. He had a little band, remember, it's funny how you're always been as a little band.
Right.
A little bit player.
Small.
And they were called the Misfits. And I was about 20 or so at that time, several years older than him, which is a lot of age when you're that young. And I remember asking little Chuck Leavell, I said, well, Chuck, would you like to take keyboard lessons? And he said, no, I'm good. I'm all right. And I just knew he was making a bad decision. And somehow, though, he managed to persevere. And he got through. He worked his way through that somehow.
Hey, y'all, this is Chris Hicks, and welcome to the Southern Rock Insider. If you like what you see, please hit subscribe and click the notification bell. It's time to rock Southern style. The Southern Rock Insider. Let's talk about Chuck Leavell. Your early ties with him, how you guys met.
The Hourglass broke up like June of 1968, late June. And I moved back to Tuscaloosa. Tuscaloosa was always a great town. I lived there several years before I was playing with the Minutes and going on the road, etc. And so when we broke up, I naturally moved back to Tuscaloosa. And there wasn't a whole lot going on in New Brockton now, under the traffic light. So there was a club in town called the Shelf Lounge, and there was a band kind of loosely held together called South Count. And most of the time they didn't even use a name. They just, every weekend, the band members would vary somewhat. One guy would be missing the next weekend, somebody else new would be in there. So I tried to get in there and organize the group some way where you had a more cohesive group, where that way you could even rehearse. They were mostly jamming and stuff. I wanted something where we could work up some material and have some, and maybe be a little commercial success. Who knew? And I love the format the Hourglass had. We had Wayne and me doing guitar, and I was also playing keyboard. Well, Greg was playing keyboards, and occasionally he'd play rhythm guitar on some stuff, and we had bass and drum. So it was a 5-piece band. So I love that, having two keyboards side by side. So I kind of use that as a template. So there was a young piano player in Tuscaloosa, several years younger than me, Chuck Leavell. This was the summertime of 1968. He was between semesters in school, and he was getting ready to go in 12th grade. And so he had a Wurlitzer electric piano, and I had my Hammond. And so there we were. I thought, oh, that's great. And he plays good. I'm like, he's a young cat. He's just a teenager, but man, this guy, he's probably going to go somewhere. And we had a pretty good band there. And one of the bass players was Charlie Hayward, who turned out being a bass player for Charlie Daniels for the last, 45 years, 46 years. And another drummer that stayed with us longer than anybody else was Bill Stewart, who later came on over, was a Capricorn drummer. Played with Greg Allman and played on tons of Capricorn acts. And so we kept that band South Count together for about 8 months. And we were getting gigs, playing fraternity parties, and probably the best band in Tuscaloosa at that time. Tuscaloosa was a great town for musicians. It's like Macon. I mean, you could go to Tuscaloosa and find your players. You're looking for somebody. And so while in the middle of that 9-month period right in there, Dwayne was in muscle shows, cutting sessions, and he called me one day and said, hey, Hornsby said, man, he said, I'm going to cut some demos. Would you come up and play on some demos with me? He said, Atlantic has heard some guitar work I've done, and they want me to cut some demos to see if I can sing, just see what I've got. And I'm rambling a little bit, but you can't. That's the way you have to tell these stories. It was so I went up, and that was in the spring of '69, and it was an interesting trip. I was up there about 2 days. I had 3 pretty good job offers those 2 days I was there. First one, Rick Hall offered me a job playing in Fame Studio as a session piano player. He liked what I was doing on Dwayne stuff. And then I met Phil Walden. He came to town, and he was in the middle of signing Dwayne to a contract, and he wanted to put a band together around Dwayne. He loved what he was hearing that Dwayne was doing. And he asked Johnny Sandlin and I, would we get back with Dwayne? And so essentially he wanted to put the Hourglass back together. But, after what we'd just gone through, and I thought, oh man, and I'd already moved here back to Tuscaloosa, and I had a good band, Chuck Leavell, Charlie Hayward, you can imagine, all these guys. And I said, no, I don't think I want to go back on the road. I don't think I want to do it. And so was Johnny. And he said, no, I want to do studio work, maybe. And Phil looked at me and said, well, if you want playing this band with Dwayne, I'm building a studio in Macon, and I want to put together a rhythm section. Would you consider coming and being a piano player? And I said, Macon, where's that? And there was no reason at that time I should have ever heard of Macon. Nothing had ever happened. He says, well, Otis Redding's from here, and Little Richard's from here, but I'm building a studio and so on. And anyway, over the next couple of months, he'd call every day, and he'd sweeten the deal a little bit. And so in just about 3 months, I found myself living in Macon, and I turned down Rick Hall's gig and turned down Dwayne's band, and I took the job at Capricorn. And so within that first year, few months of being here, getting back to Chuck Leavell, he was Chuck Leavell at that time.
Uh-huh.
And he was in 12th grade at high school, and I said, Chuck, you might want to consider getting over here pretty quick. I said, man, something's going to bust wide open over here. They got we got the studio happening, and they about to kick off a record label, and you get in on the ground floor. And he quit school in the 12th grade and moved to Macon to be here, and came in and got on an album, one of the first records we did here, which consequently didn't go anywhere. But anyway, he made his like Chuck Leavell is in town.
Here, right.
Chuck Leavell's in town. And sort of the rest is history. Funny thing about Chuck, in the early days, I had given music lessons to kind of for extra eating food, eating stuff. And I was giving guitar lessons, and occasionally a keyboard lesson if I found somebody that really had an ear, I thought really had a chance of being a real player. And I was several years older than Chuck. He was a junior in high school. He had a little band, remember, it's funny how you're always been as a little band.
Right.
A little big place.
Small.
And they were called the Misfits. And I was about 20 or so at that time, several years older than him, which is a lot of age when you're that young. And I remember asking little Chuck Leavell, I said, well, Chuck, would you like to take keyboard lessons? And he said, no, I'm good. I'm all right. And I just knew he was making a bad decision. And somehow, though, he managed to persevere. And he got through, he worked his way through that somehow. And the rest, you probably heard most of the rest of it. Then he became Chuck Leavell.
Chuck Leavell.
Yeah, it worked out real good.
I wondered about that. I remember hearing him as Chuck Leavell many years ago.
Yeah, Chuck Leavell when he came over here.
We'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah. It was probably a natural mistake that most people made when they saw his name in print. Leavell, I would have called it that. I changed it. And then we had Alex Taylor. They signed Alex Taylor. He was the older brother of James Taylor. And we cut his first album, Alex Taylor, with Friends and Neighbors. That was all of us players, same kind of thing. People wandering through and adding them till we got an album. And we went on the road, and I we did about a 6-week tour, and after 6 weeks, that was the longest 6 years of my life. That 6 years, because I'm not used to cold weather, and we were up in the Northeast in Martha's Vineyard in January and February in Canada, and man, I wanted to go back where the warm south wind blows. And I said, Chuck Leavell was here about this time. I said, Chuck, how would you like to have my gig, man? And Chuck was getting kind of skinny, hanging out here and waiting to be on the ground floor, and yeah, man, I'll take it. So Alex changed his whole, Johnny quit and Bill Stewart quit. We all quit the whole band wanted to do session work. And so Chuck was here, and I think Charlie Hayward was hanging out here at that time, and they became and Jimmy Knowles had come aboard, and they became Alex's first road band. And then Dr. John came to town, and boy, he will always be my hero. He was my favorite piano player, hands down, of all time. And I got to go out and by this time I started doing quite a bit of studio work, might have even produced something, I don't know. And I was building up a little better than what I had been. And I started going out with him playing on weekend gigs. I'd work all week in the studio doing sessions, and man, I'd fly on my gig, and I'd fly and meet them. And first gig I went was Puerto Rico. We did a pop festival, and we flew from there to Detroit and then to Virginia, different places. And man, I'm playing Hammond B3 behind my hero, man, Dr. John. And I'm looking over there and the whole time trying to figure out what he's doing when I'm playing. And that started, then he replaced his whole band. All of his players were from California. And knowing this time I need to get back in, and I had opportunity to produce somebody. I guess it might have been a Tucker album. And I said, Chuck, man, there's an empty organ seat up there. He said, yeah, man, Dr. John, yeah, man, thank you. So he took my gig there. And so that's how Chuck sort of fit in here. That's how he got started. And then the Allman Brothers, then of course Dwayne passed away, and instead of adding another guitar player right away, they said, why not a keyboard player? And Chuck was here every day, just living in the studio, playing every day. And they started jamming and all, and pretty soon he had a permanent place with them, And that's his big break.
Thanks for watching this episode of Southern Rock Insider. Please hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss a single episode. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please respond below, or you can email us at southernrockinsider@gmail.com. This is your Southern Rock Insider, Chris Hicks, and thanks again for watching.
The Southern Rock Insider.